Alright, in this video, we're going to go from this to this. So we're going to make your PC a console. For that, all you're going to need is a PC and a USB stick. We are going to download SteamOS and install that onto the computer. So for that, we want to navigate to the actual download page for Valve's Steam Deck image. Go ahead and click agree. If you want to look through the agreement, look through the agreement. What this will download is the Steam Deck image file. This is what is used to reinstall SteamOS on the Steam Deck, and this is also what Valve is using on the Steam machine. It is quote-unquote officially out. However, this is going to see a lot of changes and increased compatibility over time. Once you've clicked download, you will end up with a img.bz2 file. Use any sort of extraction tool. If you're on Windows, you could use 7z. If you're on Mac, you can simply just extract it. And there's a couple of applications on Linux as well. What you want at the end of the day is the .img file. You cannot create a bootable USB just using this compressed file. You'll need to extract it. So the 3.36-ish gigabyte zip file will get extracted into an 8.12 gigabyte image file. So the USB stick that you'll use to install and boot into SteamOS is going to have to be greater than that. I would recommend a 16 gig USB drive. In my case, I'm using a 32 gig USB drive. Now you'll need a tool to flash that onto a USB stick. You can go ahead and use Balena Etcher. Balena Etcher is available for Windows, Mac, and Linux. I've used this on Mac and Linux. On Windows, I believe I used Rufus a long time ago, but my setup is currently Mac and Linux, so that's what I will be using. In order to go ahead and flash that, you want to select that Steam Deck image here, select your target USB stick, and press flash. Once you have that USB stick ready, we can proceed to install that onto our system. Alright, so go ahead and insert that USB stick in there. Make sure that you go to the boot menu and select that flashed USB stick that we set up before. It's going to boot into the SteamOS boot image. And from there, make sure that you want to click Wipe Device and install SteamOS. Once you do that, click Proceed. It's basically going to wipe the SSD or whatever primary storage there is, and it will start installing SteamOS. This process doesn't take too long, but I'll leave the steps up here just so you have an idea of what it looks like. Now, if you're new to flashing operating systems and things like that, just remember, it's not that scary. I know a lot of text on a terminal can look scary, but all this is doing here is installing the operating system. Once that's done, it reboots, and you should go ahead and see something like this. It's an icon of a Steam machine and a controller. Once you have that, you're pretty much ready to plug your controller in. There we go. So now we have an indication to plug in our devices. I'm going to go ahead and put my controller in. And from there, go ahead and set it up like you would set up Steam. It's going to do a couple of updates once it's connected to Wi-Fi. And once that's done, and once you sign into your Steam account, you can just go ahead and start using it. Now, if you've used a Steam Deck or used Steam in big picture mode, this is very, very, very similar to that. In fact, it's pretty much the interface that Valve has chosen. So I'm going to shut this down and go ahead and set this up on the big screen. Unfortunately, I don't really have much room, so this has to go to the back of the TV, and from there I can just boot into SteamOS. There you go, full console experience. Let's go ahead and install some games. Okay, let's boot up Control. As you can see, I'm going to try to run it at a couple of resolutions. This is default at 1080p with medium settings and ray tracing enabled. I don't have all the ray tracing options enabled. I've disabled contact shadows and debris, but other than that, it should be running at a decent frame rate. I'm going to also boost it up to 1440p with an internal render resolution. And as you can see, it's getting 60 to 61 frames per second, and that's pretty good. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and bump everything to medium. As you can see, you're getting a pretty decent frame rate when you're running it at a high resolution at medium. That's doing pretty well. Now what happens at 2160p or 4K when we set the ray tracing to low? Well, the moment I turned on ray tracing at 4K, we've seen a pretty significant drop in frame rate. The video that I'm recording, unfortunately, is not going to be at 60 FPS, so you're going to go off of the counter up there to see what the actual frame rate is like. Now, if I go ahead and drop the resolution to 1080p with all the rest of the ray tracing settings, the frame rates are good. Now we can even bump up the resolution to 1440p, and that's not going to impact performance very much. So as you can see here, Control runs pretty well with ray tracing enabled. Now ray tracing wasn't something that you could run on Bazzite, so that's kind of why I went ahead and installed SteamOS. I'm going to do the same thing with The Witcher. Right now, Witcher runs pretty well. We'll go ahead and play with some of the settings and see how it performs. So now I'm going to turn on ray tracing. This is the RT preset. We're then going to go add ray trace reflections, shadows, and ambient occlusion. This does disable any form of anti-aliasing, so it's going to look a little grainy, but when you do turn that on, the performance hit isn't as noticeable. But as you saw, at 4K wasn't very good, and I dropped it to 1440p, and we're in the 50s to 60s, which is pretty nice. Overall, again, Witcher is one of those games where ray tracing does improve how it looks, and now SteamOS actually lets you do that. Next game we're looking at is Forza. I'm going to go ahead and put a couple clips here to kind of show you how the entire environment changes when you enable and disable RTGI and ray trace reflections. Overall, the performance is pretty decent. Originally I was running it at 1080p, but you can bump it up to 1440p and play around with the settings. 1440p you will start seeing some kind of a hit, especially in the Tokyo area, but once you exit the city, as you can see, you get a pretty good frame rate. So again, there's a noticeable difference in how lighting kind of changes and bounces off of things between ray traced GI and screen space GI. Whether or not you use ray tracing isn't the question here. It's just more of, does SteamOS actually let you access it? The last time I ran this on Bazzite, unfortunately, the moment you try to change any of the ray tracing settings, the game just entirely crashes. Thankfully now that's not the case. So if you're running a handheld or a full-fledged desktop computer with a good graphics card that is capable of ray tracing, I think shifting over to SteamOS may not be the worst option. Now here's just a couple more clips of how Forza runs. As you can see, the performance is pretty good. I'm running 1440p, a mix of medium to high settings, some low settings here and there, and the performance is pretty good. The lighting with ray tracing and the reflections with ray tracing do add that little bit of added realism that I quite enjoy. This was not something that I thought I could do when I was running Bazzite, so it's great to see Valve baking that into the Steam image. Alright, so there you have it, folks. You have your very own home console. Now I do want to talk about SteamOS, the official image, on handhelds. Unfortunately, the coverage isn't very great. I have it up and running here on my GPD Win, but the quick access menu doesn't work. The only way to get that to work is through the keyboard shortcut. So if you don't have a handheld that has a keyboard, it's kind of a problem. As you can see, you can't see it in the Steam button shortcuts, and the only way I'm able to get it to work is to use the shortcut Control and 2. So hold off on SteamOS on your handhelds for now and stick to Bazzite, is what I would say. So what do you think? Will this video be convincing you in the direction of going ahead and trying out either Bazzite or SteamOS? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I personally am probably going to stick to SteamOS over Bazzite, at least for my home console setup. Having the full spectrum of features with ray tracing is honestly very, very appealing, and I don't know if I'm going to go back from this. I will say though that Bazzite is better supported in terms of hardware. So you might be running an Intel GPU, you might be running an NVIDIA GPU. And in those cases, compared to SteamOS, Bazzite will give you better coverage. So I highly recommend that you give this a shot. All you need is an old computer and a USB stick, right? And from there, you can see the games that can run on that hardware. Pardon my poor driving here, but I hope that has convinced you to go ahead and try this out for yourself. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I hope to make more videos on handhelds and setting up good old games in the future. If you like this video, click the like button, leave your thoughts in the comments below, and I will see you all in the next one.